everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Pip Whitnum. I'm the Director of Project Investment here at the Australia Council. I'm a woman in my 40s wearing glasses with my hair tied back and a headset, so hopefully you can hear me clearly. Thank you for joining this webinar. This is our way of welcoming our incoming pool of peers who will be assessing the Australia Council grant programs. So welcome. For those joining us from Australia, we are of course on Aboriginal land. I am joining you from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation here in Sydney, and I pay my respects to elders past and present. I also extend that respect to First Nations people on the panel and those of First Nations peers who are joining us on the webinar as well. I also want to acknowledge that many of us are significantly impacted by COVID lockdowns at the moment. And there are cancellations, ongoing uncertainty, week 9 here for me in Sydney. We've posted a link to more information on our website about support for artists and arts organisations, which might be helpful. Please avail yourself of that. We won't be specifically talking about the COVID impact today, but I wanted to make sure that you were aware that there were some resources from our website that you could access. So just some housekeeping. This session is being recorded and a recording will be posted on Council's website in a few days afterwards. The session is being live captioned and Auslan interpreted by Kat and Nicole, so thank you. The webinar will run for about 1 hour. We will be answering your questions throughout, but have a dedicated session for Q&A at the end. We are probably all experts in Zoom after 1.5 years of the pandemic, but just in case, here are some tips about how to get the best out of the functionality of Zoom during the webinar. Please use the question and answer function at the bottom to ask your questions. You'll see it's at the bottom toolbar with a Q&A. Other questions will be answered by some of my colleagues throughout the webinar, and then some of them left for us to discuss at the end. Please don't use the chat sidebar for questions. We will be using that chat to post links to information and contact details so that you can sort of reference additional information as we go throughout. So try and direct all questions to the Q&A function at the bottom. We aim to answer all of those questions. However, we may miss some if time runs out. So we will, you can get in touch with us afterwards. We will also try to answer any remaining questions on the FAQs on our website. So we'll send you some links to that. So to kick off, thank you firstly to all of you for expressing an interest and putting your hands up to become peer assessors. We're so pleased to have you with us. This webinar will introduce you to some of the staff that you may cross paths with as a peer and orient you to the parts of the assessment process. We'll be talking to one of our peers about her experience of assessment, and she'll give you some tips for if you're assessing the first time. Finally, we'll talk about councils. We'll be talking to some staff as well about their role in the assessment process. And we will finally talk about Council's First Nations protocols and how they relate to the applications that you'll be assessing. We won't have time to cover everything, so we'll point you in the direction of more information rather than try to explain everything in huge detail. We also have a dedicated assessment team at Council who support you through the process. The team is made up of 6 assessment officers: Lucy Mendelson, Stacey Sidley, Mel Habyan, Katie Harford, Lucy Byrne, Marianne Sam, and their manager, Jane Pollard. So they're the sort of names that you might see of people ringing you or emailing you in the coming months and years. So they will be in touch with you soon. And I can see Jane's just dropped in the names and the email address, which is assessment@australiacouncil.gov.au. So I'm just going to introduce the panel to you now, and just invite the panelists to switch on your cameras so people can see who you are, and then we'll kick on with the rest of the webinar. So with me on the panel are Nadi Simpson, a Uwalare storyteller and performer who started her career as a musician, songwriter and performer with the vocal duo Stiff Gins. Nadi has been a peer on the music panel for us. Welcome, Nadi. Lucy Mendelson is one of our assessment officers who supports peers through the assessment process. Hey, Lucy. Winona Byrne is our head of literature, and Trish Adjay is our head of First Nations Arts and Culture. Welcome both. Thank you. So you guys can leave your cameras off on as we go through, but I'll be reminding you to just switch it back on when we get to your part. So, peers. We have over 600 peers approved to what we call a pool. It's a sort of a pool of peers who's approved by our board. And we have opportunities for approximately 200 peers each year to be involved in the assessment of applications. So that does mean that we may not always get the opportunity to offer you an assessment role immediately. So don't be surprised if we don't contact you straight away, but we do aim to get to as many of you as possible. Peers assess opportunities that include our arts projects for individuals and groups and organisations categories, fellowships, Playing Australia, Contemporary Music Touring Program, and the Contemporary Touring Initiative. Your role as a peer includes reading and scoring the applications on your own individually, attending some form of an assessment meeting with the other peers to discuss the applications and council staff, and then finalising your scoring to form a ranked order of applications. Council staff then apply the budget to that ranked order. We don't change the ranked order. At the moment, I'm sure you can all imagine, assessment meetings are held online due to COVID. And that does mean that we've had to change the meeting process a bit. So it's for those of you who may have assessed with us some years ago, the meetings might feel a bit different. But we've come with a process that is best for working in the online environment and still getting good decisions on applications. And we wanted to talk to you a little bit about talk to you a bit about the process for being invited to a panel and what that's like, because we're currently making calls ahead of our 7th of September closing date. And I'd like to bring my colleague Lucy in here to explain what that process is like. Hi, Luce.
Hi.
Do you want to tell us a bit about what things you're considering when you're forming a panel?
Yep, so I'm Lucy. Hello. I'm a woman with blue eyes, with long brown hair, wearing a denim jacket and a headset. So what do we consider? So we consider and we talk to the heads of practice that we work with closely and any other colleagues across council when we're considering who to approach for a panel, and we will look at the skills and knowledge base where people are located, regional, remote, metropolitan based, ensuring that we have a diverse representation that is reflective. It is try to be as reflective as we can of the Australian population, and looking at the different roles that people hold within their art form area. So for a literature panel, might have a bookseller as well as a publisher, a writer, a poet, to make sure that mix is there, and also looking at the category that we're asking people to assess.
Yeah, and it's different parts of the sector, it's different levels of experience as well. So sort of emerging artists, more experienced artists, and so on.
Yeah.
And what can the peers expect about when they may be contacted, and what kind of information they would be given?
Yeah, so we generally start contacting peers about 2 weeks prior to a closing date, and then right up until about until as long as we can if we need to. And we will approach peers hopefully with a phone call first, but sometimes that's not possible. So with an email, and we'll always follow up with an email with the panels that we may want you to sit on with the dates. If we know what the workload is, so how many applications. If we don't know that, we make a guess based on the previous panel. Also the fee for each of those panels and which categories are being assessed. And at that point, we'll ask if you're interested, if you are planning to apply, or if you have any possible connections to anyone applying. And at that point, we're just asking if you're interested and available. And if you are interested and available, what sort of support you may need to assess to be the best assessor you can be. So that could include internet and Wi-Fi, a dedicated workspace, childcare, accessibility requirements, and nothing is off the table when it comes to support. Like whatever you need support with, have a conversation with us and we will do our best to support you to participate fully as an assessor.
Yeah, because that's certainly when the peers nominate, they tell us if they have any particular access requirements, but there's a lot of things that they don't vocalize about or don't think that they should share about ways that we could support them.
Yeah, definitely. Like, and personally, like I'm dyslexic, so I find it hard to read. So, if for me, when I do assessing internally, I need a screen reader to help me do that.
Yeah, I mean we've seen it all,
yeah,
as well, and we're open to new things that we can solve as well to make sure that you can assess.
And we definitely like supporting parents and new mothers to participate.
And Luce, what happens if people aren't available?
If you're not available, just say it's not the right time for me. It might be because you've got too much work on, or because you're applying, or because you've got other stuff going on, or you just don't have the energy, and that's cool. We will note that and we will contact you another time.
Yeah. So there's just to be really clear, if you don't, sometimes we hear from assessors that they feel worried that if they say no, we might not be in touch again. If we're not in touch again, it's not because you said no, it's because we're working our way through the cohort of peers. So it's in fact, we really value it when people say they don't have capacity at this time, because it means we're not left in a position of someone having to withdraw later on in the process.
Yeah.
So Lucy, if someone does say yes, that they're available and interested, what happens next?
So what happens next is we usually approach about 10 to 15 peers for a panel, and depending on the size of the panel, it might be about 6 peers who get approved. So depending on the availability of people, we'll put forward who we feel is the best 5 to 6 at the moment peers to be approved to the panel. And once that goes through an approval process internally, we then contact the peers and let them know that they've been approved, or if at this point in time they're not the mix, and then we will contract, and we will then send lots of emails and have lots of phone conversations, and we will hold your hand and guide you through the process of assessing with inductions, and be there to answer your questions as they arise.
And I think it's worth pointing out, when Lucy says we look for the best mix of peers, that sort of longer set of peers that we then select the panel for reflects we don't quite know who's going to say yes when we're initially doing the call out. So it might be that we have a lot of people from one state who've all said yes, and we have to work out it's the mix of that person's location plus the skills and representation that they bring as well. So we try to get a balance across all of those things.
Yeah.
But obviously we don't know until we get the responses exactly what the mix is that we're dealing with.
Yeah, that's it.
So just a reminder to everyone, I can see there are some questions that are popping up in the Q&A function at the bottom. If anything that we're saying just prompts a thought from you about something that you want to ask, please pop it into the Q&A. Either one of my colleagues will respond to it immediately, or they'll leave it there for for the panel to come back to a bit later in the webinar. Okay, so Nadi, I'd like to bring you in now, please. Hey. So the first part of the peer role involves reading applications that you are assigned, reviewing support material, and then scoring each application against the assessment criteria. And we were talking, Nadi, about what that process is like as you're sort of reading and you're scoring applications. Can you tell us, or introduce yourself and tell us, how did you manage the workload of reading and assessing the applications?
Yeah, Mangindai. Hi, everybody. I'm Nadi Simpson. I'm sitting on a couch in my living room. I've got on a colourful beanie and red reading glasses and little dangly pink earrings. I've done it, I think I've done 3 music panels and a couple with the First Nations art strategy panel, and trying to think about how to answer this question, I've realised every process was different. And I think I've been my best assessor when I've taken in the information and thought deeply and made notes about that, but then coupled it with thinking and feeling time. So when I could have been a better assessor, I've read the information and gone into the meeting. The more, for me, the more space, breathing space, thinking space, interaction space with makers and their creative ideas, the better I'm equipped to walk in the room and then speak and speak and assess other people's dreams. So, I was trying to think, how can I say this, in a way that people could understand. It's sort of like, one day I would love to go in one of them sidecars, so you got the dude at the wheel and the one who's having all the fun at the side. You can assess your applications and be the driver and get from A to B. If you accompany it, if you open your scope to not just reading and being analytical, if you can find a bit of breathing time in your assessment, then you remember how you felt when you read it. Then you go into a room with other people who have assessed and felt, and that's when what I think the beauty of peer assessing is, really diverse ranges of opinions, and finding a way to support artists to make really wonderful work. So you get a lot of applications, and every time you do it, it's going to be different. When I did it the best, I not only read, but I gave those ideas time to breathe. So I didn't just set aside Australia Council assessing time. I took those projects and those thoughts and those aspirations with me when I walked down the street to get some milk. Things like that, So for me, giving that breathing space, a bit of space outside of the page, really helped me be a strong support for other artists in their work. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I remember you saying to me, you had allotted, these are my 3 days. I'm going to do all my reading and all my scoring now, and then I'll be done and ready for the meeting. But yeah, that allowing space for the ideas to percolate, and because you are scoring them individually, but you are also scoring them with reference to the others. So allowing those issues to bubble up and the comparison to kind of happen is important.
Yeah, well, I mean, and it is an art itself, If it was a science, we'd give everyone, here's your A4 page, lemonade page on how to do it right. But we're not like that, and we're not looking for those sort of things in our creativity. So it sounds airy-fairy. The more creative you can be in your process, whatever that is, the more you're able to do work you're not familiar with, or genres you're not familiar with justice, because you're having a reaction and an emotive feeling to work, which is what, you know, what we all want to create. And, you know, it is a process, but we are creative people. So to find ways of that works for you. When my very first one, there was like 140 applications. I thought, right, this week is my OSCO week, and I locked myself away in a room and I read. And when I got to the meeting, I thought, oh, but I could have felt a lot more. And I really learnt that from the other peers in the room. It was really wonderful to see everybody had their own process and was different, and not to be worried that there's a right way to do it. I think that if you know that before you go in, then, you know, you're on the right track.
That's a good point to pick up on the meeting itself. So I just acknowledging, Nadia, obviously you attended face-to-face meetings back in the days when that was possible, and our peers will be online. But that said, people will still be talking about applications and their assessment of those applications. What was it like for you in the meeting? How did you find that process of talking about applications with the other peers?
In my first couple, I was scared little mouse sitting in the corner. And, you know, if there were things that I felt strongly about, I would squeak, but I wouldn't scurry around between their toes and make them all jump up and, you know, listen. I think that the diversity of artists in an assessing room is the most wondrous thing. You know, I wanted to be a peer for experience, but also I wanted to learn, you know, and I learnt from watching other people. And it was chalk and cheese, talking about mice and cheese. I don't know why I'm going there. And sidecars, it's getting off rails here, but I learnt so much listening to how people talk about the things that they are passionate about, but most importantly, the things that they don't know. And so there was expertise in the room that wove together, that was there in service of people's applications, that I am very, very grateful for. That's, you know, when I think I'm an artist and I make work, and how does that change the world? If I want to somehow give back to my community, being in a room like that when people are championing and talking about other people's projects is one thing I can do. So at the beginning, I was worried that I didn't know as much as, you know, the conductor who's been conducting for 40 years, and, you know, the jazz dude sitting back in the corner looking cool. But we share a language. We want to advocate for our peers, and we want to see good work. That was enough. And we found ways to get there. We all took different paths.
I think it's a really important message to kind of emphasize. You come to the panel, we don't expect peers to be experts in everything. And in fact, that's why we have 5 or 6 other voices sitting around a table, real or metaphorical, is that you can ask questions of each other and you can draw on that experience, can't you?
It was, you know, I'm so grateful. It's been one of the biggest learning curves in my life, to be in a room where I know something, but it's a tip of an iceberg, and together. And this is why, you know, it's really great when First Nation mob get in there, because we're good at relating and having knowledge be disseminated through groups of people. And so you walk in there because you're deadly at what you do, but you're no deadlier than the collective knowledge that you all hold, that you flesh out when you're there, thanks to grants and people wanting to make art. So it's a collective thing. It's really easy to go in there and I've done my assessment and I like these ones and I've got this experience and this is what I know. But when you get in the room, you must find a way to become part of this sort of pulsating ball of knowledge and excitement and work. That's the key, is how you interact with people to find work that's going to speak everyone's language.
And it's we did talk about this previously, Nadi, just the idea that no question is silly, because if you're thinking it, someone else is thinking it pretty much on the panel, aren't they?
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's a really beautiful thing too, that you know, you can be as different to the person next to you who's flown in from Adelaide and, you know, whatever. But the stories of these applications are bringing you together, and the will for people to make that good work. It sounds like a pipe dream, but it is. That's why people get in that room. That's why people are on this Zoom, you know, because we want to support each other to be the best we can. So when you get that concentrated in a room, I've always found the meetings to be, you know, and actually we don't get to do that, especially as musicians. We go out and play and we go into our rooms and we think. We don't ever often get that concentrated, facilitated time to talk about process and to talk about what really makes great work, and to, you know, try and mold that out of what's in front of us. So it's a really wonderful, rare, rich time with other peers.
You're getting a lot of love on the chat, Nadi. I'll just tell you right now. Just one final thing. Hopefully, there's a bunch of you out of people watching this webinar who haven't assessed for a jurisdiction, haven't assessed for a trust or foundation. This is the first time they've ever coming to some kind of assessment process. What do you wish you'd known? Is there anything else, advice, or what you wish you had known before you assessed for the first time?
Yeah, I wished I would have known to take notes, and also voice memos. I do now, because I can disseminate information. We can all do that. When you write or make or scribble, whatever it is, when you're taking in that information, you can also capture how you feel about that information, which is the thing that you kind of flesh out in the room with peers. And if you can capture the feeling of reading that application at that time, that is going to really help conversation in the room, because we've all read the same words, and so remembering how you felt when you read those words, or remembering what you thought about those words and capturing that is really helpful in discussions. And I also wish I would have known that just that thing, because I did it on the computer and there's a little box for comments and I just filled that in, and then I had to go, and that wasn't enough for me. And actually I don't take in and explore information like that. So however it is you need to work, and we're all creative people. I don't know if you could do interpretive dance about every application you read, but however you can make that a physical embodied experience is going to help discussions, but it's also what the work's trying to do, you know, and we're not machines. So to remember to bring that creativity into your assessing will help you be, you know, a really good contributing member when you're ranking and talking about all the awful things about where money stops and where it starts. You know, you can do projects justice by having them make you feel and interact before you get a yes or a no.
Actually, that's a really good point to remember, because there's never enough money, and it can be really, you can really get a focus on reasons to say no. And we always try to turn it on its head and say, what are your reasons to say yes? So that you can get excited about the things that you will be able to fund, rather than the inevitable disappointment about what perhaps might not get supported as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Oh, Nadi, thank you. We will come back to you when we're on the panel, so you're not going far away, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of people wanting to ask you questions as well. So at the meetings, we've talked around the meetings a bit. You will be supported by a number of Australia Council staff in each meeting. So there will be a staff member who will facilitate or chair the meeting. I'm one of those people. You will have your assessment officer who's been working with you through the process to get you up to speed and helping you get ready. There will be an artist services officer, and they are the sort of main point of contact for applicants when they're making their applications, and they'll be there kind of representing the knowledge of the guidelines and what the applicants have been providing and their advice. And then you will also be joined by what we call the subject matter expert, who is usually the relevant head of practice for that panel. So I'm joined by both Winona Byrne and Trish Adjay, who have been the subject matter experts for our literature panel and our First Nations panel, respectively, and who also were both peers for us prior to joining council in their role. So Winona, do you want to talk a little about your role, the role of the subject matter expert at the meeting, and how you support the peers?
Yeah, thanks, Pip. Hi, everyone. So I'm a middle-aged woman with short hair and glasses. I'll just talk about being in the room with the peers. I guess what I'm there for is really to give an overview of the industry and to talk about any trends that I've seen or heard about that might be helpful when you're assessing the applications. So, you know, I'm kind of like trying to fill any gaps in the knowledge that you all bring. So I sort of see it as a way of synthesizing, I guess, the experience and expertise that is in the room, filling any gaps, and maybe also providing any information about what we've seen come through the rounds previously, what kind of projects are getting supported, what kind of directions people's work is taking. And also if there's any other information that might be helpful about other ways that we support arts at council, so what other opportunities are open that artists or organisations might be able to use. And that's really, and then really it's about answering your questions. So sometimes peers have questions about, you know, why is this in a literature panel and not in a First Nations panel, or those kind of questions. And both the facilitator and I are on hand to answer any of those questions. I don't score, and the subject matter expert doesn't score any of the applications. So we're really there to support you in the decision making by giving you all the additional information you might need.
Trish, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Hi everyone, I'm Trish Adjay calling in from Bidjigal country in Sydney. I've got a black afro hair in a high bun. I've got brown skin in my early 40s. I've got pink bubble studs. I'm wearing a pink orangey woolen jumper because it's cold in Sydney today. And I'm sitting in front of a beautiful large artwork by Mrs. Burton from Jala Arts in the APY land. And there's a lot of pinks and purples and reds and oranges in the artwork. So I think working with the First Nations panel, as Winona was saying, we're really there to sort of provide that expertise and additional sort of information that peers might not have, because you know, we spend a lot of time in the sector seeing different projects, talking to different artists and organisations. We get to really sort of have that, I guess, what we call sort of like a helicopter oversight of what's happening across the First Nations arts and cultural sector or the literature sector. And so we're able to sort of bring that knowledge and expertise to the panel and really sort of answer those types of questions for the peers.
And the advice that you guys give, as a facilitator, I'm often having to say this, that just to set the scene, you guys are there to be drawn on as a resource to be asked questions. You will also offer advice throughout, but ultimately it's the decision of the peers, how they want to score and rank an application, isn't it? Yeah,
definitely. We're just really there to provide that sort of, it's almost like neutral advice, but it is definitely up to the peers to look at the application, assess them against the criteria and make those decisions.
And before we move on to the next bit, are there any tips or advice for our first-time assessors that you would like to share?
Oh, I was just going to echo Nadi. I mean, Nadi said so many wonderful things that were really useful, and I wish that I knew when I first did it. But the ones that stood out for me were making notes, really important. Those notes that you, or just thoughts or feelings that you have when you first read an application. But I was also going to say to not be afraid to go into bat for something that you really feel strongly about. Even if you feel like you may be the only one, it usually sparks a conversation, and that's where the best decision making comes from, that collective conversation. And it may not be advocating, it may be questions that you have about, oh, this didn't really make sense to me. What did others think? And it's a way of you making sure that you've heard all sides and you've really given, a fair hearing to that applicant. So yeah, I guess I would just say, also, even though everyone has their own expertise, they don't need to feel that they've got to stay in their lane and only comment on those applications that come, that marry with their expertise, that, you all would have thoughts and insights into ways of working or organisations or different art forms that would be relevant to almost all applications. So join the conversation. A lively conversation is really wonderful to be part of, and it's the thing that I actually enjoy most about my job in council, is being part of those peer conversations. I learn so much. So yeah, just to bring all your questions and all your expertise into the room.
Yeah, and I think also, when I was first a peer for council on the visual arts panel, we had a number of applications. So, I always sort of tell people, if you can, start reading the applications early. So like Nadi was saying, you have time to really sort of reflect on the applications, on the words that are written down, and so you have time to sort of think about the criteria and how the applicant has tried to address those criteria in their application. And when you first sort of go in, I was quite nervous as well, because I felt like I didn't sort of have expertise or experience like the other peers on the panel. So everyone, just to sort of remind everyone that everyone's there because they're bringing their own sort of experience and expertise and knowledge to the panel. So feel like you can sort of talk up and as Winona was saying, support particular applications if you wish.
Thanks, guys. So Trish is going to stay with us while we move on to the final presentation part before we open to questions. We're going to focus now on Council's protocols for using First Nations cultural and intellectual property in the arts. So applicants to the programs that you'll be assessing will maybe working with First Nations artists or engaging with First Nations cultural heritage as part of their project. And all applicants to the Australia Council are required to comply with these protocols as a condition of funding. And the grant guidelines themselves will reference the protocols in terms of the support material that applicants may need to provide, or in the prompts to the assessment criteria that you'll be using to do the scoring. So it's really important that you are familiar with these protocols while you're assessing. It's obviously, we're not expecting you to be the experts or the only voice in the room. Staff bring some knowledge to that as well, as other peers, but it's a responsibility for everyone to be familiar with these protocols. So Trish, you've been very involved in the development and the refreshment of these protocols. Can you give us an overview and just sort of explain what they cover?
Yeah, sure. So I've got a hard copy of the protocols here, but you can actually download them from our website, and James put it in the chat box as well, the link. So these protocols are our 3rd edition at Australia Council, and the protocols are really sort of best practice guidelines for people wanting to work with First Nations artists, content, organisations and communities. And the reason why we have these protocols in Australia is because currently under Australian laws, we don't have sort of full protection for Indigenous art and culture. So we engaged a First Nations lawyer, Dr. Terry Jenke, and her team to write these protocols. And in the protocols, they have a particular framework that Terry has developed over the years in her practice, which are the 10 principles that really sort of talk to, you know, sort of respectful engagement with First Nations communities, consultation, consent, and communication. You know, when you're starting a project, who do you need to talk to first to either get that consent and, you know, work collaboratively with that community to make sure that they are, you know, giving their permission and want to work with you on that project. They also sort of, the 10 principles talk through issues around what we call benefit sharing, which is like an international sort of legal term, which basically means, you know, if you are going to be working with elders or cultural custodians, that any sort of fees, funding, we'd like to see also in the budget that consultation fees are paid either to those elders or traditional owners that you're working with and involving in that project. And then also the principles have other sort of elements talking around sort of secret and sacred cultural heritage. So there might be, for example, secret or sacred images or songs or stories that can't be shared outside a particular community, and that also needs to be respected. So that's also reflected in the protocols. And then one of the other sort of really important principles in those in the protocols talks to what we call attribution, which is really sort of acknowledging that First Nations people should be credited for that cultural heritage and knowledge that's coming out of those communities. So that's really the sort of 10 principles in a very quick nutshell. And then the second part of the protocols is 14 different case studies. So these are all sort of arts projects that we have funded over the last couple of years at Council. So it includes every different art form. So Terry and her team worked with a number of different artists and arts organisations across the country to really sort of bring out the those 10 principles in a practical way, so people can understand, you know, how do you respectfully engage? How do you get consent? How do you do benefit sharing? And so, for example, the literature example in there is the Magabella Books example, because they get asked quite a lot. Magabella Books is an Indigenous publisher in Broome in Western Australia, and they get asked a lot to collaborate with non-Indigenous writers and publishers on particular First Nations projects. And so they have sort of stepped through the 10 principles in that case study to really illustrate how you sort of work through those 10 principles. And there's a really great checklist at the back of the protocols as well. So you can go through those 10 principles within that checklist to really sort of understand, have I ethically consulted and collaborated with First Nations artists and community in this project?
Amazing, thank you. So I just wanted to bring this into kind of a pragmatic a lens of what the peers might be experiencing when they start to read applications. Can you give us an example of what an application that has really thought through the protocols would look like? How would you know when you're reading it?
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of really strong applications coming in where applicants or organisations have really thought about wanting to ethically collaborate with First Nations artists or communities. So in an application that's really strong, you would see that there would be self-determined practice within that application. So you have the actual names of the First Nations, either elders or artists who you're going to be working with. And you'd also have evidence of that. So whether it's a letter of support or even a video, you know, if English isn't the first language of that particular elder or traditional custodian, having that letter or video in the evidence, in the additional material in that application would really sort of bring to life a strong sort of application that has followed the protocols. And then also in the budget, you see the budget lines that talk about consultation fees for elders or traditional owners that are going to be involved in that project as well.
I tell you, the budget is the source of truth. You really know what is valued and what where the equity is in an application or a project when you see how it's reflected in the budget.
Definitely.
And what are the red flags for you, Trish, that you would be looking at when you're seeing to what extent an application has engaged with the protocols?
I think some of the red flags that I've seen sitting on the First Nations panel have been the peers have sort of said this application isn't viable because you know, they're working in a particular community and they don't see any letters of support, any names attached to that project of particular First Nations artists that they might be working with. Also that sort of budget issue around, you know, no payments going to the elders or cultural custodians. And I think, you know, it's really sort of important that we see that evidence in those applications, but also applications that don't have any sort of attribution going to a particular community where that knowledge is coming from. Or also applications where there might be an organisation or an artist just going into a community and, you know, teaching dance classes, for example, in Central Australia. Well, what's that got to do with, you know, have you consulted with anyone in those communities that you're going to be working with, in the schools you're going to be working in? So they would be the type of, I guess, red flag applications that, yeah, we see.
Yes, also a sentence saying, I am familiar with the protocols and I will observe them as I do my project with no evidence.
Yeah,
also,
yeah.
generally a pretty good giveaway.
I know. Or I've seen other applications where they've just said, oh, we're working with elders. Well, who are you talking about? You know,
Yeah.
like who are you get? And there's, you know, on all the art form panels, there's always going to be a First Nations peer as well, who might not necessarily know, you know, everyone in Australia, but if you're talking about a particular region, they will know different people from that community. So it's really, really important that you have that evidence, either through letters of support and so on.
Yeah, but that's also not a reason for us to not engage non-Indigenous people to not engage with the protocols. That's everyone's responsibility. And as I said earlier, staff will be reviewing applications looking for potential weaknesses that we can address through the assessment process as well, just to let you know what you're assessing. Thank you, Trish. That's amazing. I might invite all of our other panelists back then. And we're going to start having a little look at some of the questions. So just a reminder, if you have a question, excuse me, that you want to ask the panel, you can drop it in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. And I will just start working through some of these now. So we have a question about, after the initial scoring of applications, do we go back and reassess once you had read them all? Did you find your scoring responses changed? I think this is, I'll pass this over to you in a second, Nadi, and then open it up to anyone else. But certainly the whole idea is that from your initial scoring, I'll frame this in the context of what the purpose of the online meeting is about at the moment. When we had face-to-face meetings, it was around the panel having time to collectively agree the ranked order. So it wasn't so much rescored, but you had the opportunity to shift the ranking collectively. where the way we work it in the online meetings at the moment is about it's an opportunity for you to seek advice from the other peers so that you can do your best scoring, and it's the collection of everybody's best scores that achieves the final ranking. So yes, the idea is that you always have the opportunity to go back and reassess based on reflection and then based on feedback from the other peers. But Nadi, do you want to talk about your experience with that?
Yeah, I didn't find that there was a lot of, there weren't many, in my experience, projects that were, you know, I had astronomically high or really low out of the running, that people's, because of the guidelines and their sort of how we assess them, they're all there or thereabouts. So it's been very rare for me that an application has moved incredibly so in the rankings. Of course, you listen and champion and react to other people championing things, but generally the scoring means that things are quite condensed and there's not a lot of movement, you know, up and down. I've never been in a thing where things have yo-yoed unusually. So people come to those meetings that I've been in all being there or thereabouts with projects, and discussions can move things but not bounce them around, I think. So that I have, in response to that, there have been things that I've wanted to talk about. So in the meetings I was in, there were things that were out of funding possibility that I wanted to speak about and have spoken in the room, just because I felt if they ranked low, but I had a connection in some kind of way. And I've done that a little bit too, that things that I feel need to be present when we're talking about funded excellence, it may not get on the page in numbers, but sometimes it's just important to say, for things to be present. And I've done that a few times. It hasn't affected it being funded or not, but that's also a tool, you know, to keep it a real human experience, you know.
Yeah.
Certainly
on some of the other panels, we do see quite significant people pick through the emperor's new clothes in some cases, where they think something's really great, but the second someone voices a concern about it, it unravels a bit. But we also see people going, I think you've missed a gem, having the opportunity to kind of argue it up, actually, and advocate for it. Was there anything, there are a few questions around this. I can see there about people potentially changing their response once in the meeting. Trish or Winona, was there anything you wanted to add to that?
Trish, did you want to say something? I was going to say I've been in meetings where things have moved quite a bit because the extra attention that if somebody raises a question about the application and people might reread it and then find something, a question that they had is answered through the discussion and maybe then elevates. Also, I guess, trying to think about all the different things you're balancing in, applications that are in the kind of content that are in the funding zone. You're wanting to, I guess, keep all those different parts of the sector in mind. So, emerging, established, different, genres. So that there's a lot of things you're balancing. And so sometimes there can be some movement, and that's fine. That's good too.
And I think it was worth picking up. There were a couple of questions there that I've just sort of rolled into this one. Not all peers change their mind when they come to a meeting, and some are very flexible to kind of take on responses. And I think your approach might change the more you do it, actually. So you might be very open to other people's feedback initially in an early meeting, or it might be the opposite, that you have come in with quite staunch views, and then you either open up or you get a bit firmer in your take on the assessments. Yeah. So it was a cheeky question from anonymous attendee about how much you are paid as an assessor. If you haven't already seen the peer handbook on our website, I would suggest you go and have a look at that, because the Commonwealth Remunerations Tribunal determines how much we can pay an assessor. And so it's a sort of a nominal daily rate. And the reason it's governed that way is because our peer assessment committees are actually a subcommittee of our board. So the board have delegated authority to look at applications to the peers, which is why the board approves them. And consequently, because it's a subcommittee of the board, the fee is set based on the REMS tribunal determination. So it's about $7.50 per day. But obviously there's a smaller component of that higher above other daily rates from the REMS tribunal to acknowledge the reading. It does not cover your entire costs or time. We 100% acknowledge that. So that may be a determinant about whether you take on an opportunity. But we'll tell you how many days fee is included, and we try to batch the work so that it's not too onerous for the size of the fee, but that's a call you'll have to make. Luce, is there anything you'd add to that about the fee?
Yeah, we will always tell you how much we're setting aside for the meeting that we're asking you to be on. So if it's a day and a half, like, or if it's a 2-day meeting, we'll let you know what that lump sum is. And we do try to pay people fairly quickly as soon as the meeting's done.
Yeah.
But at the moment it's $7.50 per day.
Yeah,
per meeting.
That hasn't. Yeah, they haven't. They changed the rate. Usually annually, we haven't had an uplift for a little while though, I don't think.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's at about $7.50. Yeah, and you know, yes. It's a call that you will have to make about whether that's enough money for the time that you'll be putting in, or whether you wrap this in as part of your own professional development. And that can be a legitimate one of your reasons to say, you know what, not this time as well, if that's not so good for you.
On that quickly, when we
yeah.
do fly people to Sydney, we also pay for all the costs
Yes.
for coming to a meeting. So that's not part of the fee. That's that's on top of. We pay for accommodation and flights and meals and so forth.
We may get that back.
We may get
one
that
day.
back one day.
Feels a bit far away at the moment, but yes. So there's a question from Alex about if we don't get to participate in an assessment meeting this period, are there limitations on applying again? Can we opt to roll over to the next period? Where the way the board have set it at the moment is that if we don't get the chance to use you in this pool, you're out for 2 years, I think it is, and then you can apply to become back in, unless we need to, occasionally we go back out to people who have particular skill set or a particular representation that's lacking in the pool, and so we might roll you over to the next one if that's the case. I think we've tried to limit the numbers in this pool in the knowledge that there are finite opportunities, so that we can genuinely offer as many people an opportunity to participate. But we have had people we've tried consistently to get on a panel who over that 3 years have never had the capacity to participate either. So hopefully we'll find a sweet spot of your availability and an opportunity to offer you as well. So that was answered. How do subcategories work within art forms? Theatre, physical theatre, music theatre, puppetry, circus. Is there a breadth of work that is funded, or do we try to compare these vastly different art forms? It can be challenging. We don't separate out applications by genre. They all come in. So for example, for arts projects for individuals and groups, you'll be getting applications from artists working in multiple different genres who will be applying for a wide variety of activities, and that can be quite challenging. Just acknowledging you sometimes you have to kind of respond to, is it the best example of its kind? And is it consequently better than the other examples of its kind? Is it sort of in the right ranking relative to those? It can be a bit challenging. I'm just really conscious we're quite limited for time, so I might just see, Nadia, is there anything that you want to, there's no quotas, I should say, about how many of, you know, what kind of application can be funded within that panel. It's the panel's determination of what is most exciting to fund against the criteria. Any reflections from you, Nadia, about the sort of the different genres that you're looking at, or how you make sense of them?
Only that, I mean, your fellow peers in the room, look, I've spoken about it. That's where you learn, and where you are deficient, they are expert, and so that's a really wonderful. That's fine. That's excellent. Actually, you don't need to know everything, and the expertise of other people there really helps you to make really strong, solid, good feeling decisions about work. So other peers are a real asset to you. You're not working against 4 different things, and that really happens in the room.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to wrap it up there, although I could hang around and talk about these things for ages. So apologies if we missed your question. I know some of my colleagues have been working furiously to try and answer as many as they could in writing. If we missed your question, you can get in touch with us by email at assessment@australiacouncil.gov.au. You can see Jane's popped in contact details in the chat there. We will strive to update the frequently asked questions on peer assessment on our website in the coming week or two. Massive thank you to our panelists, to Nadi, to Lucy, Winona and Trish, and to our interpreters, Nicole and Kat, and to my colleagues working behind the scenes to set this webinar up and answer your questions throughout. And a very humble thank you to all of you for joining us live today and who subsequently watch this in your own time. We're so pleased to have you working alongside us at Council as we treat carefully the dreams of the artists out there and hopefully get to fund as many of them as we can. Stay safe and well. Thank you.